Thank you, Chair Landrieu, and thank you for holding this timely hearing. I thought I'd start and just by point a few things out simply because I appreciate the effort by the chair and ranking member to sort of try and get at some apples-to-apples comparisons. In New Mexico, oil production is up. We're at 46 million barrels last year, the #1 Western producer on federal land, I believe, at the moment. But at the same time, natural gas is down. And those are very much tied to, in large part, commodity prices. Price plays a real role as to whether or not something is going to be produced or not. The depression in natural gas prices has meant there's been places that are very viable under different price arrangements that are simply not being produced today. However, given the stability in the oil market, the relative high price, we have seen that very successful in the last few years. I'd also just point out, in terms of the percentage leased, at least from my point of view in the state of New Mexico, the leasing is largely going to be focused in places where there's actually oil and gas. So within the San Juan Basin on BLM land, within the Permian Basin on BLM land, and basins that may be developed in the future, you see a lot of leasing going on. In the southwest part of the state, for example, there's a good deal of BLM land that you're not going to see a lot of leasing in simply because there's no resource there, or it hasn't been discovered if there is. I want to ask Director Kornze, I think by all accounts from everybody you've heard from, the pilot process, the pilot offices have been incredibly successful in promoting oil and gas development on both federal and tribal lands. With the authorization expiring next year, are you starting to see any impact of that uncertainty in future funding in terms of the Bureau of Land Management's ability to fill staff vacancies?
I appreciate that question. The short answer is yes. We are seeing some uncertainty in the hiring process because we want to be able to offer folks some long-term view of sustainability of their positions. With that authorization expiring next year, we have over 200 positions within the Bureau of Land Management that have a question mark around them. So it matters to those teams. Last week or the week before, I was in Silt, Colorado, at one of our pilot offices. They were able to double the size of their team with this funding. So half of that office is focused and funded through this authorization. So it makes a difference for sure.
Great. About what fraction of the BLM staff in New Mexico State office are funded under the pilot program? Do you know?
So I believe we have about 650 BLM employees in New Mexico, and about 10% of those I think would be an appropriate number that would be funded through this program.
And with the main original pilot program in Carlsbad office, are those employees able to focus on leasing demand anywhere in the state? In other words, if demand surges in the San Juan Basin versus the Permian Basin, are they able to help with balance that out over time?
It does get complicated in terms of what kind of funding we put behind various activities. So we can often find a way to make that work, but having the flexibility that's built into this new version is going to make our lives and those authorizations easier.
That's very helpful. Under existing law, Director Kornze, what are the revenues from renewable energy projects on federal lands used for, and are any of those revenues retained by the BLM to cover the cost of just doing the permitting?
Yeah. So all the revenues we collect from renewable energy projects go back to the Treasury.
So none of it can be used to pay for the overhead that is required to actually permit those projects?
None.
If the BLM did have dedicated funding to cover administrative costs, what impact do you think that would have on your ability to offer leases and process permits in a more timely manner?
The ability to have some sustained funding would allow us, not unlike in the oil and gas realm, to have some sustained, well-trained, well-experienced teams that we could put together that could help really drive this, because when you put new folks on a project, just like in any situation, it takes a while to come up to speed.
Since the completion of the solar energy zones in 2012, how many of those zones have an active auction or application process?
We've had two auctions, and at this point, we actually we need a rule, which we're working on, to give us leasing authority within those zones, competitive leasing authority. But right now, if we do see multiple applications within a zone, we can go through a it's almost like a competitive process.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.